As my dad would always say, the fundamentals are fundamental. So when you create your Google Analytics for property, you want to make sure that all the foundational work is done correctly so that you have the best chance of getting the best data that you possibly can. So a lot of this work happens in the admin section. So in your primary navigation, you're going to come down to the admin section here. And then you're going to see these two columns. Now, I highly encourage you to touch as many of these things in this property column as you possibly can, just because there are so many things that get hidden in the different sections of this column that are actually very, very important to your setup. So we're going to go through them, and I'm going to highlight some of the things that I find to be very important. So the first thing, you have the setup assistant. This is really just kind of like a checklist that Google creates for you. Some of the things, are really important. Some of them aren't. You can kind of use this as your discretion. But I'm going to go through each of the parts of this anyways, so you don't really have to worry about that much. Property settings. The big thing here is making sure you have the right currency and that you have the right time zone so that all of your reporting, when you're matching the two things together, hopefully is at least somewhat close as it can be. What we don't want is for Facebook to be reporting in Pacific time and GA4 to be reporting in Central and our point of sale system to be reporting in Eastern time and have to do all of that math and try and match those numbers up. It's just not going to work very well. Property access management, just make sure whoever needs to have access to your accounts does have access to your accounts. Also, this is a good time to kind of go through and make sure that nobody has access to accounts that shouldn't have access to them anymore, whether that's old agency partners, old people that worked at the business, all of that kind of stuff. Now, the next important part is the data stream. So this is what you create when you create a Google Analytics 4 account. Is a data stream. That's how you start collecting information into the platform. So here you can see this is just main site. So what you're going to find in here is all of the information that you need to set up the account, or to set up the tracking, which is really just this measurement ID here. And you can just copy it by clicking this button. And then some things in this screen that are really important. One, the enhanced measurement is controlled here. So you can see if you click on the +3, it shows you all of the things that are turned on by default. Different accounts have different things turned on by default. It really just depends on when you created the GA4 account. So as you can see, this doesn't have forms turned on by default. They were turned off for most properties. Now I'm starting to see some turned on by default. And if you want to turn them on or off, any of those things, you just hit that little gear and it gives you all the options here. So again, this form interactions. The most important thing here is to note that at times this can capture form events that aren't actually form events. So you really want to make sure you're troubleshooting and debugging your forms before relying on this solely. So sometimes it will pick up the meta pixels, so your Facebook pixels, and that can really mess up your form information. So again, you can see I have it turned off here in this test account, and in most of my accounts I do actually have this turned off and create form tracking through Google Tag Manager. But if this works for you, that's great. It's just, again, something you're going to want to make sure you test. The next things you can see in here, modify and create events in here. This is something that we're going to do later on and actually in a different section of GA4. You have your measurement protocol, API, if you need it, that's where it is. Then you have the Google tag options. Now this is where things start to get really important. So your tag settings, make sure you click into here and you're going to see some of the settings right here. So automatic event detection, configuring your domains. This is really important for cross-domain tracking. So you could come in here and add any of your conditions. And if you hit show all, you also can filter out your IP addresses if you want to do that for internal tracking. And you can also list any unwanted referrers. So you know, if you have multiple domains, or sometimes this is really important when you have payment gateways, so the PayPals, Stripes, all of that. Sometimes those need to be listed here as well. You have other options in here as far as adjusting session timeout and things of that nature. You can come in and change those. It's not really necessary. I will say that the session timeout by default is 30 minutes. So some people would like to come in here and change that. I usually change mine to about 5 minutes. But I do not suggest changing this timer for engaged sessions, because so many metrics in the platform in Google Analytics 4 are based off this idea of an engaged session. And Google has already told us, and what they consider to be an engaged session is something that lasts 10 seconds or longer, 2 or more page views, or has a conversion event. So I tell most people to just keep this where it is. All right. And then you also have your tag instructions and things. But really the big things here in the data stream section are this enhanced measurement and configuring your tag settings, coming in here and going to show all, and going through those and working through them as they apply to your business. Next, we have our events. Again, this is probably where we would come in and create our events or modify them if we need to. We'll go over that in a different section of the course, but this is a really good place to do a spot check and make sure all of your events are coming through. They will all be listed here and show you how many are being collected, how many, like what the count is, and how many users are completing those events. Same thing with conversions. You will see them come through as they happen. It takes about 16 to 24 hours for data to start rolling through the platform and being collected and presented. And then the same thing kind of more or less when you add new events to the platform. One thing to note is that creating these conversions in GA4 is a lot easier. So you can come to your events and you'll see that there's a column that says mark as conversion. When your events start rolling through, there will be a toggle here. You just click on that toggle and it will mark it as a conversion, and you'll be able to see it here. So you can see this one's kind of grayed out because it is a conversion. And Google recognizes that, so I can't turn it on or off, but this would have the conversion marked as a conversion, and you would see them all here. Again, these are really good places to kind of do the spot check, just a really quick, are all of our events being tracked? You can see them all here. Next place we have is our audiences. Now, a really good thing about audiences is that you can connect your property to Google Ads, and then you can use these audiences as targeting in Google Ads. So works kind of like it worked in Universal Analytics. So they have some templates in here if you want to use some templates. They have some general ones, so like non-purchasers, that's a big one for people. But you can also create them from scratch. And what's really cool about these audiences, again, we'll have a whole section on audiences later on, but there are some really cool things in here, like you can create an event to be triggered when somebody gets added to an audience. You can create audiences based off of, you know, different dimensions. You can create audiences off of, so like if we came in here and we did, let's see, e-commerce, we could do like based people that, you know, looked at a specific item, or people that spent a certain amount of money, whatever, we could create an audience for them and then take it into Google Ads. So this is where your audiences are, and you can see again how many people are in those audiences, which is really important, especially if you're taking it over into Google Ads, just because it has to have that certain threshold so that you can serve ads to them. Also, if you create an audience, it's a lot easier to apply filters to your reports by audience name than it is to go in and kind of recreate that audience every single time. But again, something for a later date. Custom dimensions. This is so important. Custom definitions. This is where if you're passing any parameters along with your events, specifically if you're using something like Google Tag Manager and you pass along parameters with your events, you're not actually going to see those parameters in Google Analytics 4 unless you come into your custom definitions and select the parameter, create a dimension for it, and save it. Then you will see those custom dimensions come through. But if you don't do this, you're not going to see those custom dimensions come through at all. Data settings, big things here. Data collection. This is where you can turn on Google Signals. Now, Google Signals, I do not believe is GDPR compliant. I don't know 100%. I will say, though, this uses third-party data. So it is something that if you have privacy concerns, you definitely want to get checked out by a privacy lawyer. But what this does is it brings in your demographic data. So if you don't have it turned on, which this account doesn't have it turned on, you're not going to get gender, age, and interest data on your audience. But if you turn it on, then you have potential risk for privacy stuff. You can also come in and do things by region. So you can say certain regions I do or don't want to collect location and device data. Again, really helpful for GDPR. So yeah, all of that's controlled kind of right here. Then we have data retention. So by default, you can retain event data for 2 months. Most people are going to want to change this to 14 months. I highly recommend you do that, because if you don't, then you're not going to be able to use parts of the platform after 2 months. So like explore, I wouldn't be able to do explorations for events more than 2 months ago because I want to have that data, because I didn't come in here and change this. So go ahead, change this to 14 months. We'll click save. And I do say reset user data on every new activity, just so we can keep as much data as we want. Data filters, this is really for internal traffic. I don't suggest using this for anything else. And they'll give you some warnings and stuff as you start to create data. Channel groups, this, I know a lot of people like to come in here and customize their channel groups. You can, the good thing about having this option in here now, so data settings, you have channel groups. If you click on the default channel group, which is what you see in all the acquisition reports in GA4, you can see all the different options that they have for the channel groupings. In the text below this video, I will have the link that shows you how Google determines what belongs where. So what's considered paid social, what's considered organic video versus organic social. All of those things are explained in the documentation below. But you can also come in here and create your own. So it gives you kind of the shell of what's already in here, and then you can come in here and edit it. And then you can obviously use that grouping. Data import, some people use this, some people don't. This is just for bringing in external data into your Google Analytics. Reporting identity, so Google Analytics 4 uses modeled data to kind of bridge the gap for people that are using like cookieless browsing, for things that may have been missed by the platform just in general. So you'll see that you have the option here to use, basically you can use either user ID, Google Signals, or device ID, or all three of those things, or one or the other. You can kind of, you know, use these different options. What Blended does is bring in that model data, which allows you to kind of, again, fill in those gaps. So what I recommend is sticking to the blended data. If you need more granular data, if you feel like you're not getting really good data, you can go to device-based, but I will say it kind of messes up your tracking when you are going back and forth, things of that nature. So I just would let you know that blended is probably what you want to stick with as we move into the future, but some people do use device-based, so as you wish. Another thing that I just remembered with Google Signals right here is that if you turn on Google Signals, you will get thresholding, a lot of thresholding, which just means there's not enough data for Google to confidently give you the information without feeling like you could tie it back to a user, basically, is kind of what that gets at. And when you're using Google Signals, it's a lot easier to tie things back to specific users, specific groups of users. So you get thresholded a lot more. So that's just something to be aware of. Okay, so we did reporting identity, attribution models. So by default, Google uses a cross-channel data-driven model, which they've created. And basically it just gives a little bit of a piece of the pie to each channel that impacted a conversion, right? So if somebody came in from Facebook, came in organically, and came in through ads in that order, this would say, okay, all of them get a little piece of that puzzle or a little piece of that pie. Whereas, you have last click, which would mean only only whatever I said the last one was, would get a piece of the puzzle, or only Facebook would get a piece of the puzzle, etc. Right? So they use cross-channel data-driven, which is important to note when you're comparing it to your ads data from, Facebook ads or something like that. The look back window by default, 30 days for acquisition and 90 days for your conversions. So if you need to change any of that, or if you're wondering where any of that's controlled, it happens right here. Property change history, this just keeps track of all the changes. Data deletion requests, again, a GDPR thing. If you need to delete data after a certain amount of time, you can come in and do that. Debug view, so this is to be used in conjunction with Tag Manager. So if you're previewing things through Tag Manager and you're seeing hits go through and seeing all your triggers and stuff come through, you'll be able to debug here as well and get a list of all of those events and all the parameters that were collected and all of that stuff. Again, another section of this course will go over that. Also, in this column, some of the easiest things, but some of, again, really important things you can do in here. Link your Google Ads accounts, link your BigQuery account if you have one. If you don't have a BigQuery account and you're not getting a ton of data, you can create one and create a warehouse for all of your data. And it's very, very cheap or free, again, depending on how much data you're going to be collecting and storing. Merchant Center, if you have it, and Search Console is another really big one to make sure that you link. And all of that data will be able to, kind of look at in the reports section in another part of this course. And yeah, the rest of this stuff is kind of just all of my things that I can delete in here if I want to. But all those things, so I really encourage you to go take a look, touch it, have conversations about it with your team, and be really, really thoughtful about the foundation of your Google Analytics for property and how it is going to affect the data that comes through that you are ultimately making decisions on.